Welcome back, everybody. It's Thursday. We're here at Race Service. You know what that means. It's another edition of Team Nitto at home, talking with Tuerck. I also have my main man, Drift Idiot, a.k.a. Sam Nelvin. What up, dog?
You talking 2J to me today?
I'm talking 2J to everybody today. We're all talking 2J today.
We're all talking 2J today.
We're talking 2J.
So this is a special episode. I mean, every week's a special episode, Ryan, because you're here.
I'm special.
And we're very far apart across the room, which is why we have this beautiful two-camera setup. But yeah, we're talking Tuerck, and sometimes we have guests today. The guest is the wonderful 2J engine right there that Ryan has, but 2Js in general. So we are going to be talking about Tuerck's background with the engine. He, believe it or not, is not an engineer. He's not an automotive technician.
It's hard to believe, I know.
But he's been making power on these motors for just about as long as anyone in the world, and he knows a ton of information about them. We also want to answer all of your questions. So if you're in chat, please
start sending them questions.
Sending questions. Anything you have 2J related, anything Tuerck history 2J related, really anything. We just want to talk to you guys about 2Js. If you want to know which version is the best, if you want to know specific nitty-gritty stuff, by all means, Tuerck will give you an answer. Can't guarantee it'll be the answer. We'll give an answer. But yeah, we have
There will be some words spoken.
There will be words spoken.
They might be correct, they might be dodging, or they could be wrong. Who knows?
So off the bat, why don't you just get us started with your kind of history with the motor? What was the first one you put in your car, and why did you do that at the time?
So the first JZ that I was introduced to was the 1JZ, and that's the one that I put in the 1J S13. Which a lot of you know of from off seasons 2. Off seasons 1 had the SR20 in it. Off season 2 had the 1JZ engine in it. And that happened because the SR blew up, and I had a 1J in an S13 already, so I already had the whole swap kit. So I decided, like, let's not waste any time. Let's just toss this in and keep driving. So that's why that went down. Now later on, I was introduced to 2JZ back in 2013 when we built our first Scion FRS, obviously now Toyota 86. And that was built by PSI. The 2JZ was, I forget what the compression, I think we were 9-to-1, like 264 cams. I think made like 950 at the wheels with a Garrett GT 4294. It was a 3/4 stroker from BC. And that was my first time driving in competition with a 2JZ engine. And right here, let me introduce this engine. This is going to be for the East Coast car that we're currently building. This came from the gray street car. This is one of my old race engines from when Nameless Performance was handling my FD program. So this is actually pretty intense. It's like one of the most intense motors I've had as far as 2J, minus last year's engine setup. This is still wet sump. But it's 12-to-1 compression ratio, you know, ported head, SuperTech valve train, 264 cams, and I never really made a ton of power on this thing because it was always for the East Coast car, and we only wanted to make, I don't know, it made like 550 when I first built it, and then we turned it up a little bit to 650, and then the last year that was in the street car, we made about 750 with it. And a couple different size turbos. We went from a 3584 to a 4088 and then turned the boost up on a 3088. And then the new setup on this, let me just walk you through this real quick. This is going to get dressed up with some new parts. And the biggest power adder being the new Garrett G Series G35 1050, which Dylan Hughes just put on his FD car. And it made some killer numbers. Made, I think, 860 at the rear wheels at 30 PSI on a 3-liter 2JZ. I think he had 272 cams, non-stroker, like I said, 3-liter. And the torque and the power are killer. Like, the thing is so well matched. So this is actually a similar size turbo. This is a Garrett 3884, but it's a similar size to the 35 1050.
Why don't you give that guy a pickup so we can see the sheer size of that in actual ratio to face.
So the 1050 just has a way bigger wheel on it, but it is overall dimensions are pretty much the same as far as the outside, but the internal wheel and intake and exhaust are both a little bit bigger millimeter wise.
You ready for some audience questions here?
Let's have some questions.
All right. We got a question from San S-A-N, not Sam. And he or she asks, VVTi or non-VVTi? This is a question that I think I've researched a bunch myself as well, trying to figure out what's the right way to go out of the box, and I guess what's the right way to go when you want to make tons of power. But what's the preference for you?
For me, so this is a VVTi. As you can see, this has the adjustable intake cam gear on it. But I would say 100% for drifting purposes and just for overall power. If you're looking for more torque, the VVTi is massively better than running the non-VVTi. You can get way better torque curve with your tuner. If he knows how to tune it well, you can add anywhere from 30 to like 60 extra foot-pounds of torque throughout the power band. So I would say it's a no-brainer to go VVTi. Now you are adding another part that could potentially fail because it has, it's more of a mechanical working piece. It has a solenoid attached to it. You have to plug it in, and then it runs on oil pressure. So there's like an added element to the engine that could potentially fail, but it is Toyota, so I mean, chances of it failing are pretty low. So the GTE I feel like is really good for the drag race guys because they're not really too worried about, I don't know, the torque numbers from the adjustable cam gear. They're making crazy freaking power no matter what. So, but drivability wise, it does wake up the torque, or it can wake up the torque a lot more.
What how many 2Js do you think you've gone through in your day?
Way too many, unfortunately, and it wasn't really due to the engine itself. It was more operator or assembly error.
You Tuercked it.
Yeah, I mean it was set up to be Tuercked.
Yeah, but you've made, when it's properly set up though, an engine lasts you more than a season.
Yeah, like last season and the season before, 2018 we would have gone just one motor the entire year, but we had an issue with the serpentine belt that we just something that just popped up out of nowhere. Like it was perfectly fine for the first half of the year, and then all of a sudden nothing changed, and the belt just started spitting itself off. So the belt spit off one event, ran low oil pressure or zero oil pressure for like 0.5 seconds, half a second, and that was enough to start wiping out the bearings, so that had to get rebuilt. Otherwise that engine would have lasted all year. Last season, where I made the most amount of power ever on one of my 2Js, which on the G42-1200 Garrett turbo at 32 psi on a 3-liter block, we made 1,016 wheel horsepower, and I had 272 BC cams in it, SuperTech pistons, and the thing was mega legit. The OCD port job, Tuerck spec port job from OCD Works, SuperTech valve train, and that motor lasted the entire year, all 8 rounds of FD, like 4 solid days of testing, and then it's still running now with Colton from Redline, who ended up purchasing the car.
That's a good testament to the reliability.
I mean, having a good tuner is key to that as well, and having all the right components to go with the engine. So John Reed is he's a master tuner of the 2JZ for sure. And
so right now we're playing off seasons too. So this is a 1J, but this motor in this car had more or less ran nonstop at how much power do you think you made on this guy?
Like 400, not a lot.
Yeah, so I mean this car though.
But I think the 1J sounds better than the 2J, and I don't know, you guys everybody has their own opinion, but in my opinion it has a shorter stroke and a smaller port job, so it has a little bit different of a tone to it.
Yeah.
It's just not as deep.
Which they can't hear right now because the audio would drown us
but it's
out,
not, the 1J's tone isn't as deep as a 2J, and I think that little bit higher of a tone makes the 1JZ sound a lot better.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Tell us a bit about the setup in this video. So this is back in the day.
Which one? Off Seasons 2?
Off Seasons 2, yes.
Yeah, so Off Seasons 2 video had a GTX Garrett 3071. I'm not going to remember everything, but actually the dyno video at Densport Garage on my YouTube channel from like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago has the entire setup. eBay manifold that was reworked by Dominic from Dominant Engineering. He just welded a V-band on it and added some bracing to the external wastegate pipe so that thing didn't fall off. And it was just an atmosphere wastegate, no boost control besides the spring on the gate. I think 550cc injectors, slightly upgraded fuel pump, nothing crazy. It was pretty basic. And I actually have a video coming out next Tuesday about all that stuff. So hit my YouTube channel and check that out next Tuesday. It's coming.
It's coming.
Or should I do it tomorrow? Should I drop it tomorrow?
I mean, do it as soon as you feel appropriate to drop it.
But well, it would be an early Tuerck Tuesday.
Well, then by all means.
And then I wouldn't have anything for Tuerck Tuesday.
Give the people what they want, man. And we got another question though, and that is from OK. OK simply asks, why do you use 2Js? Is it because you were just used to them and have a lot of experience with them, or just like them over other engines?
I always, since I got the 1J car, I always wanted the 2J, and I wanted to compete with that. I knew there was a lot of potential there. And then when we added the anti-lag system to the 2J, and then we added nitrous to the 2J, like it was the ultimate package. It was, I think, better than a V8 setup, although V8 does have more torque and a little bit more drivability down low. But you can make more overall power than a naturally aspirated V8. So for me, it was more about the progression of pushing that engine to meet the expectations and performance goals that we had with our competition FD car. And then the motor just works so well, and when it's tuned right and you have all the right parts in the combination, I think can last so long. Like this motor here has been on low boost or low powers, I'd say anywhere from 500 to 750 for the last like 4 or 5 years, and it's, knock on wood.
Is that wood?
Not giving me any trouble. Just pretend a little bit.
Yeah. Did you already, I was setting up stuff in the show earlier, but did you already go over kind of what you've done to this motor in front of you and everything
in the beginning.
That's changed from a stock version?
Yep.
Cool, I wasn't listening, so.
Yep, 3/4 stroker, 12-to-1 compression, ported head, SuperTech valve train, 264 cams. Most of its life had a 4088 GTX Garrett turbo on it. And then this is the manifold. This is the nameless performance manifold. Stainless steel, so it's a lot lighter than like Schedule 40 stuff that a lot of people
Then why are you
use.
struggling to pick it up?
And then a 60mm gate.
If it's so light, then why are you struggling? I thought you've been
working out. Does it look like I'm struggling?
Yeah, it looks like you're struggling.
Sorry. I did just work out.
Yeah, whatever, spaghetti arms. All right, we got more questions here. Richard Jacks asks, Ryan, will the B58 be the new 2J? And that's the new Super motor, correct?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the availability, how much it's going to cost, and how often those motors, how many of those motors are going to come into circulation. They're relatively new, and I'd say the majority of them are going to stay in the Super chassis. So for the tunability and the swap, the motor swap itself into other chassis, I don't see that happening right off the bat. I'd say give it a few years. I think there will be a progression in that engine too. I think that the Mark V Super is going to have more of the racing, like one of the M motors eventually, or the S motors, like an S58 or something. I think that'll be like the progression of the Mark V Supra in the next couple of years. So I don't know, the B58 could become, but it's relatively unproven at the same time. So I think it just needs a couple more years of development and aftermarket to support it to see what the advantages and disadvantages of it are.
And Ryan, why, and before I ask this question, make sure you guys, if you're watching in chat, throw your question down. We will most likely answer it. So just throw your question down, 2J related if possible, but anything in the realm of Ryan Tuerck, we will definitely try to get it over to Ryan. But in the meantime, tell me why 2Js are so popular. Like, why have they been embraced by so many people in professional drifting and amateur drifting and just in general around the automotive world? Lots of people love this motor.
The motor's proven 100%. I mean, you see the drag race guys making thousands of horsepower with the engine and not having any issues, and just the aftermarket support. I mean, there's so many aftermarket companies making parts for these things. So, and then at the same time, you can make over 500 horse with the thing totally stock. Just turn a boost up or add a small turbo and a little extra fuel, and the thing will be making 500 in no time. So it's just such an easy engine to tune, and reliability is there that it's almost, like I said, it's just almost a no-brainer as far as the performance goals and the longevity of the engine itself.
And I might sound completely out of my element and like I don't know what I'm talking about, which is probably true, but it's the block too. The fact that it's a iron block from the factory, which kind of just means that you can throw power at it, and it is that in combination with, I'm sure, fuel and air and other design features, but it more or less is just one of the burliest from the factory engine options historically, right?
I would say so. I think Toyota really built this with a lot of power goals in mind, and I think there was somebody out there, I forget, I think it was Dominic, who was telling me that there was a guy that had this machine that tested the thickness of metal, so he went to the 2JZ and compared a 2J to an RB, and the 2J casting was way thicker than the RB block casting. So with, I guess, comparing that, you can say that Toyota did have big power goals in mind for this engine, which obviously is true today because of the crazy amount of horsepower a lot of guys are making in a drag racing community.
All right, we got some more questions then. This one is from Ricardo, and this is actually good because you just mentioned Dom, one of your main dudes that helps you build all these cars.
Yep.
Ricardo asks, how can we work for you? now, I'm sure that there's an easy answer to this question, which is offer free work for Ryan Tuerck, and he'll pick you up on that because he just likes people doing his work. Because he's like me, I don't really like working on cars. I don't think you don't hate it, but you'd rather be driving.
It depends on the project. I like working on new stuff. I'm enjoying building the East Coast car. I enjoy working with Dominic because he's so meticulous. He pushes me and like really, he actually frustrates me, but it's in a good way because like he can't not do anything absolutely perfect. So even when it's a situation where I'm like, dude, who gives a shit? Like or who gives a crap? Nobody's gonna see that. Doesn't matter to him. Like he knows that this is his work and that's there on the car forever kind of thing, and it has to be done right the first time. With that being said, I don't know what your skill set is. I also don't really have a position open for anything. Dominic kind of fills those positions, but he's also busy a lot of the time, so it's difficult to have him out here for extended stays to work on cars. That's why the East Coast car hasn't been updated in about a month and a half or a month.
In general, what's like the best path for a young technician to take to want to be at that level, to be on an FD team or to just be a master technician in this world?
You need to, depending on what your goals are. If you're just trying to be a shop hand, then you just need to get yourself into the community, the drift community. If you're looking to work for a drift team, your best bet is to start going to local events, start meeting people, start just asking like, hey, you need a hand here, you need a hand here. Tell them what your experience level is. Try to get a job at a performance shop. Any of those kind of things. If I don't know what your skill set is, so if you're a little higher, if you already have like a good mechanical sense and you already work on cars and you do your own swaps and stuff like that, and you have a little bit of fabrication skills, then you should have a little bit easier of a time to extending your free labor in the beginning to helping people out. So it's more or less just getting involved in the community, meeting people, becoming friends, and starting relationship with people.
Which you mentioned Dylan earlier, and that's Dylan's path to success, right? I mean, because he kind of...
Yeah, Dylan Hughes, who's now a Pro 1 driver for his second season and just finished his brand new FD build that you can all check out on Blackout Garage. He came to an FD event. He met Chris Forsberg. He just started helping Chris. He loved this attitude. He was eager to work, eager to help. He already had decent fabrication skills or good fabrication skills. I don't remember how good he was back then. But then he started working for Chris's team. That's when MA Motorsports handled Chris's program at the time. So he got a job where he was hired by MA Motorsports. He moved all the way east to Maryland to work for them. He worked for Chris for like 3 or 4 years. And then slowly was kind of building his car, his S13. He got an engine, he got a transmission, he got a rear end. And then he was just driving, developing his skills in his off time. And then finally, everything worked out for him and he got his opportunity to shine. And he made it work.
All right, we got some more questions coming in hot. Harry asks, what is the Achilles heel on the 2J and how would you address that?
That's a tough question, Harry. The Achilles heel. The only Achilles heel that I have found is really the oil pump. That's really the only thing that I have ever had issues with is because the oil pump gears are, I forget what you call them, like powder cast or something like that. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's a lot of vibration in the crank, it can really damage that. Or if you get your engine built and you line bore the crank, since the oil pump rides on the crankshaft and it has a pin that picks up so it locates the oil pump, that could be different if it's not taken into consideration by your engine builder. So if they line bore the mains for the crank and it's a little bit off by whatever, and you put your oil pump on and the same locating pins as it was from the factory, you could be loading one edge of the oil pump harder because it's not a perfect circle. It's not that perfect balance in the middle anymore. So I think that's what happened on a couple of my engines and why I had damaged and destroyed the oil pump gear. And then when that breaks, it usually spits back into the engine and damages the crank and damages the rods and the whole bottom end. And we actually had one where it spit the gears out of the block, and it was already a 3-4 liter stroker block that was super legit, and it was junk. So it was a huge bummer. That's really the only thing that I've noticed.
And this is from Jeff. He asks, is it worth doing a valve train refresh before I plop her in? I read that you can get some valve float on the stock setup. Thanks.
Yeah, if you have stock springs and you are revving to like 8,000, I would say 100% go get yourself some SuperTech stuff. You don't even really need to change the valves if you're not making huge power. It's better to change everything, obviously, but if money is an issue, you should at least put new springs and retainers in the engine. Especially if the head's already off, you should definitely just give yourself an extra couple weeks and get that dialed in.
This is a quick follow-up from the previous question, I believe. Tor Anders asks, didn't you use dry sump, Ryan? In regards
Yeah,
to the
last 2 seasons we did dry sump engines. In 2018, I had my main engine that was dry sump, and then a spare engine was a wet sump, just for cost reasons. And then all year last year in 2019, we had 2 dry sump setups for the main engine and the spare engine.
And then while you guys keep sending your questions in whatever chat you're in, make sure to address them. Any questions you might have on 2Js, anything else Tuerck related, send them over. If you just joined us, what's up? Ryan, what is like the proper path you would say for, you got your stock 2J, you just got it off the boat, you overnighted it from Japan. What do you do if you don't want to change a thing and just throw it in your car? What do you do if you want to do like 500 and you don't have to go down the full list, but then what do you do if you want like 1,000? All
right, so you just got your engine, and before you put it in, you should really look everything over very well. You should do a leak down test, compression, just to make sure that everything checks out so that you know what your baseline is. You should also check all the gaskets on the engine. If you're running a stock twin turbo setup, you need to check all those gaskets. They're all metal gaskets, so they do last a long time, but those engines are old at this point, so you just want to make sure that you get everything sorted before you put it in the car, because then you get it in your engine bay and it's a bigger pain in the butt to take things off and remove stuff. So I would do that, and then you should be able to just boost up those stock turbos. I heard that they do explode. I don't know if they explode. I've never experienced this, so I don't know, but I have heard that if you tune the stock twin turbos up to like 16 PSI, which is I think their threshold for maximum boost pressure, it'll make anywhere from like 450 to 480 wheel horsepower, which is really good. But
without changing anything, you just are literally cranking up the boost essentially.
Without doing anything, you should probably upgrade your fuel pump just to make sure, because those injectors are also going to be maxed out. So I would do upgraded fuel. I would do an upgraded fuel pump and a fuel pressure regulator just to turn that up a little bit and squeak a little more in there to help you out. But those turbos will probably go bad pretty quick when you're doing that. So I would keep them around like 14 PSI, just so they're just under the threshold. They'll probably last a lot longer if they're in decent shape. But a lot of times they're going to come from Japan or wherever you got it from in probably pretty bad shape. And to move on from that to make 1,000 horsepower, you have to basically do everything.
Real quick, I love that from stock, which the Japanese gentleman's rule at the time was, you're not supposed to do more than 280 horsepower. So I know that a lot of these factory ones, dyno probably higher than 280 horsepower just out of the box.
Yeah.
But I just love though that let's call it around 300. All you do is crank the boost up to about 500 and maybe do a fuel pressure regulator and a fuel pump. And that's pretty much it. And that's your 500 horsepower. Not the best way to make it necessarily. I mean, you would potentially do like intercooler and a turbo and a tune, maybe.
It's 100% not the best way to do it. Yeah. I mean, and then if you're once you dial up from that, that's like the max you can do on a stock. And you're pushing the limits of the stock, and it's not ideal to do that because something is gonna fail, and then you might ruin the entire engine. So that's definitely not an ideal situation, but that's what's possible. To make 1,000, you need to do everything. Everything. Rods, pistons, head port. Oh, you don't actually have to do a head port, but it'll be a lot easier to make 1,000 with a head port. Valves, valve springs, bigger cams. I think, we made 1,000 on the 272 cams. I made around 950 with 264s, and that was kind of the threshold of where the turbo was at that we had. So you're going to need, you need to do a full-on build, full-on fuel system upgrade, everything to make 1,000 horsepower.
We got a few more questions coming in. I'm populating that list, so we're going to get to those shortly. But on that 1,000 horsepower conversation, like the meta, if you want to call it that, for 2Js, at least in pro drifting, has kind of changed over the years. And we still see, out of the top 5 cars in Formula Drift, like most of them are 2Js still, which is pretty awesome to see, like the Warthouse guys, yourself, and just so many other 2Js in FD. But for a while, you guys were doing anti-lag. Sometimes you're doing nitrous. Sometimes you're boring and stroking. What's like the current thought process on the best way to make that 1,000? In regards to adding, doing bore or a big power adder like nitrous or anti-lag or...
Yeah, so the 2JZ, you do not want to bore it. You want to keep it 86.5 as long as you can, because then you can only go to 87 for the bore. So you want to I think it's 86 actually. So you want to stay at 86 as long as you can for the piston diameter, so that you have room. If you have an issue where you break a ring and you score the side of the cylinder wall, then you're going to have to go probably 5,000 to make it 86.5. But then when you hit 87, the head gasket gets really thin between the cylinders, and you're at the threshold of when you're making big power where you might just blow through to the other cylinder side and ruin the head gasket, and basically your block is shot at that point. So that's kind of the threshold. That's where you want to stay. For stroking, you can stroke. That helps with torque. Doesn't really help with the overall power, but that helps with a lot of bottom end power. And then adding, nitrous is an incredible power adder, really cheap and very cost effective. It also it cools the cylinder. Like, it really is incredible, but it has to be done properly. It has to be tuned properly because it can go very bad in a very quick amount of time. So you just need to make sure that you have all your, a really good tuner that knows what he's doing, like John Reed, who has tuned all of our 2JZs. And then the anti-lag system, which we simplified last year, and it worked the best it ever has, which I'm not going to disclose that information just yet. That'll be on maybe a future vlog or something. But again, you need a tuner. Like, all of the parts that you can buy the most expensive stuff that you want, but if you don't have the right tuner, then it's just you're potentially gonna have issues. Your parts aren't gonna last and or perform at their potential.
So we've got a bunch of your guys' questions lined up. I'd say we have so many right now that if you want to get your question in before the end of the show, make sure to get it in soon. But first, we have a question from, let's do Jeff Foster. He says, I noticed that you typically run a V-band open scroll as opposed to twin scroll. Most traditional super owners seem to prefer the twin scroll. Any reason you don't?
Nitrous.
That simple, nitrous. Gotcha.
Nitrous helps with so much. That's why we get away with running such a bigger frame turbo in a lot of these smaller FD tracks, because we run a progressive a progressive nitrous solenoid, like a boost control solenoid. So you can ramp the amount of nitrous into the engine. So you don't want to really hit it super hard under 3,000 RPM, because it just loads the bearings way too much, adds too much cylinder pressure, and just like it will potentially spit a rod out the side of the block if you add too much. So we usually ramp. John Reed would have to potentially correct me on these numbers, but I figure we start about 20 horsepower worth of a nitrous shot, about 3,000 RPM, and then we kind of ramp it up, and then say around 6,000 RPM, you're pretty good, and then you can just throw a ton more nitrous at it. And that helps spool the turbo. The way we have ours tuned for those big frame turbos is we just hit it with a little juice to wake the turbo up so that it fills in the gap of having just like that super big arc of power band on the dyno. So it'll crawl it up like this rather than shooting straight up. So it fills in a lot of that power gap using a nitrous to spool the turbo. And then we don't run nitrous over the top end. So when we hit about 16 to 20 PSI on the turbo, the nitrous turns off, and then we just let the turbo do the work. And then once the turbo's spooled, we run anti-lag too. So off throttle, the thing's still making like 30, 32 PSI, and it'll sustain that boost pressure for like 5 to 8 seconds off throttle. So honestly, once you get the thing juiced off the start line and you're making full boost pressure, you're pretty much good to go for the rest of the lap. We're at maximum power.
You're crazy, man.
I know.
This is a general question from Ella Coco. Says, how difficult do you think the season will be with all the rounds cramped up due to the entire pandemic thing going on? So a lot of the FD rounds, if you guys don't follow FD closely, are just going to be kind of rapid fire, back to back to back, so we can still try to fit in 8 rounds later in the year.
I'm actually looking forward to it. I have, as much it is nice to have a little bit of a break in between each round where you can go off and do other driving stuff. It's it doesn't keep you in the same level of driving, or the same, I don't know what the word I'm looking for
headspace.
is.
You're in the zone.
There's a certain competitive headspace that you're in when you're at the track, and then when you leave and then you take a break for like 3 to 4 weeks, and then you come back to it. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it takes like 2 days to get back into that headspace. So for me, I am kind of like that, where it takes me a little bit to warm up. So I am actually really looking forward to having the rounds a lot closer together. That, and this year I don't really have to work on the car. I can just show up and drive. Because Papadakis Racing will be handling the Corolla hatchback for me, which is going to be great. So it'll still allow me to do other things. It's just,
Yeah, a little bit.
It'll be sick. I'm really looking forward to the year.
How does from a driver's butt dyno feel 2J versus the spacing on the engine code that the Corolla has, but how does that motor, 4-cylinder, big turbo, 2AR, how does that feel compared to the 2Js you've been driving forever?
I don't, it's tough to, I can't compare at the moment because I haven't driven the Pro car yet. We haven't done any testing, so I haven't driven the Corolla hatchback in its full 1,000 horsepower craziness. I've only driven the Corolla hatchback demo car at 600 horsepower with a smaller frame turbo on it, but it spools super fast. That car is like almost like the JZ with a GTX 3071 on it. By the time your foot is to the floor, it's already making full boost. So it's already burning up tires, and it's super fun and easy to drive. So I'm looking forward to the Pro competition car at 1,000 horsepower, running nitrous and a bigger frame turbo and more boost and everything. I'm hoping it's about the same. I'm hoping it's about the same as a 2J.
All right, this one is from First Gear Bandit. Says, since Ryan loves the GT86 chassis, what does he think of the original AE86? Always been curious, which I don't think I've ever really heard you discuss that car.
I know. I haven't really had much of a chance to even drive the older AE86s. I love them. I love the way they look. My crew chief, Brian Hartsock from Unicorn Garage, he is a huge AE86 fanatic, and he has a really great car, but he continues to upgrade it and make it crazier and add more power. And then, those things obviously are very limited to what you can do with them with how they are stock. So you have to upgrade the rear end as soon as you start making a little bit of power, and then the motors that they come with are pretty low on power. So I would love to drive one. I would love to own one in the future. It's definitely on my list of cars to build. Hold on a sec. Sorry guys, getting a call here. Let me just decline that real quick.
There you go.
All right, we're good. My bad. So yeah, the A86 is 100% on. A86 is 100% on my build list in the future. Probably wouldn't be a 2J. Probably be a light 4-cylinder in it, turbocharged with legit rear end and a little bit of an angle kit.
And then OK asks, at what power level would you recommend to change the fuel to E85? I can say the words. And you don't use E85 in the Pro car still, do you? Or?
I don't. The Corolla, the Papadakis Racing engines run E85. My 2JZs have been running VP Racing fuels, the import, for the last 4 years. We changed to that. I know a lot of companies are doing a lot better with their E85 now, but the import is a phenomenal fuel. It's 120 octane that's oxygenated, and it is one of the best fuels that we've ever run as far as pushing timing and making power. The characteristics of the ethanol, since it's an alcohol-based fuel, you have a little bit more of a benefit there for cooling, but you have to run 30% more of it to make the same amount of power as gasoline or something like that. So we just want to keep it a little easier and run race gas. And like I said, the VP import is I think superior to the E85 that we have run in the past.
And then this is a name in a language that I can't pronounce, unfortunately, but I'm going to call you Steve. Steve says, how much nitrous bottles do you spend per race on average?
Since we only use nitrous to really help spool the turbo and not run it over the top, we would get, I think, 8 runs out of a 20-pound nitrous bottle. And the biggest the shot would be, I think, is 150 horsepower shot. So we would rarely run it up that high, depending on a track. If we needed a little more power, we'd run the nitrous over the top. If the track was super grippy, like if we were at, the only 2 tracks we would do that at is Irwindale or Seattle, where there's a bigger bank and you need a little bit more juice just to keep the thing going out on the outside wall. So that's about it. Yeah, about 8 laps, typically.
And then just a few more questions before we say goodbye for the day. Jacob asks, favorite person to drive against? I guess it could be FD, could be off season, but I guess off season you would say Chris because you know him.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, me and Chris drive together all the time, and we're always in tune with each other. We always kind of know what we're doing and what's going on, and being able to predict somebody's moves in front of you makes it a lot more fun because it's a lot easier and a lot more relaxed to be able to stay up close to somebody's door and transition right up on them and all that. In competition, it's so much different. But Chris and I drive the most against somebody else. The person I drive with the most outside of competition is Chris, and I love it because, like I said, we just kind of know each other's style and what we got going on. So competition is a lot different. I like driving and competing against all the drivers in FD just because everybody has their own unique style in their own car, and their car has a unique setup on it compared to yours, and everybody prefers all these different things. So it's really fun to be able to also figure that out. That's part of the biggest challenge of FD is figuring out the driver and figuring out the strategy against them to beat them.
And then last fan question here, Ling Ling V1, version 1 of Ling Ling asks, can you use GTE parts for a GE?
Can you use GE parts for what?
GTE parts for a GE, so 2J. It depends, right?
Yeah, shoot. I don't really know much about the NA blocks. I don't think there's much different about them. I just know they don't have piston oil squirters or something, and some of the casting stuff is different, like it doesn't have, or the holes are plugged up. I honestly, sorry, I cannot really answer that very well because I haven't had any NA blocks. I've only had turbo GTE blocks. So you're gonna have to ask somebody else. My bad. I'll put that on a list though to educate myself for sure.
All right, then I do want to play us out here with the Burke Mountain / Tuerck Mountain video. So tell me a bit about the car that drove this video we have here. There's the white car. So this is when the street car was white, and you were ripping up this ski resort mountain.
That was this video is the original streetcar engine and setup that Dominic from Dominant Engineering and I built. That engine is actually now in the 2JZ NASCAR down at the Blackout Garage, and it was a GTE block or a GTE engine, 3.4 liter stroker, SuperTech valve train, BC Racing 264 cams. I think it was 9-to-1 compression, and I think we only made about 550 to 600 horsepower in that video, because we're running, it was a GTX 3584 turbo running I think 24 PSI.
We just saw my handbrake, by the way. I just want to point that out, that I did steal the handbrake from this car during Drift Garage.
Oh, you did? I didn't even realize that.
That handbrake will end up in my S chassis. So.
Oh, I hope it treats you well, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, this car, it was like, is this your, obviously you have fun driving the pro cars and the pro 2JFD cars you've driven over the years, but do you have more fun maybe in like a 600 horsepower version of this, because you can just be wide open throttle 100% of the time?
I mean, it's tough. It's two totally different relationships if you want to go look at it that way. The competition cars are like such they are such a fine comb tool that you're using to perform. And the non-competition cars, the demo, we call them the demo cars mainly, there's more of a personal relationship there, because those are the ones that you usually work on more, and you're upgrading everything yourself. So you're a lot more involved with that car and that chassis and how that performs and the way it performs on track. So I'd say it's tough. It's a tough one. There's nothing like driving the most insane freaking pro cars on the planet, such as the FD cars for drifting. But there's a lot more of a fun factor, and there's zero pressure to drive the demo cars when you're out there just putting on a show for the fans or for the crowd, and just purely driving for the joy of drifting. So it's definitely a hard balance there to choose one or the other. You know, when I do eventually, years down the road, step away from pro drifting, I'll still be enjoying it as much or more of just going out there for the pure joy of it and tuning and ripping cars with friends.
And that video, the Tuerck / Burke Mountain one, is special for me, because I think I was already editing Tuerck a little bit at the time, but that was like my first true action edit. And I also got to see what was so impressive to me is, like, in a lot of videos of driving stunts, there's a lot of cuts. But you more or less only cut because the camera had to move. You were more or less shredding up that mountain each take, as much as they would let you, and oftentimes further than they wanted you to go, because you would have so much fun and just keep driving past the cutoff point, because that's just the kind of guy you are.
I'd say, you know what, and I realized this the other day watching a couple old videos, and the reason why we mainly try to just do single takes or a second take is because we only have a half a day sometimes, or like a single day worth of daylight hours to get an entire video in. And there is so much that goes on trying to film one of those videos that you can't get it all done in one day. So it's more or less up to me to perform on point, and a lot of times I'm like critiquing myself on a lot of those shots, like, oh, this could have been better, I could have been more outside, it could have been more dramatic here. And it's just like, well, we don't have time for that. We don't have the money for that. We don't have the budget for that. Just freaking get it done. And a lot of times it turns out great because of that pressure that you have to get those videos done. But it's just it was a funny thing that I realized the other day when I was thinking about those situations.
Well, thank you guys for talking 2J with us. Hopefully we got at least some of your questions answered, but you can always slide into Ryan's DMs, and like I said, don't ever expect the answers to be 100% truthful. He'll do his best.
I'll do my best. I'll let you know if I'm not educating. If I'm not educated on the situation, then I'm not going to try to tell you guys the wrong information or guess. I'll let you know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Pre-warn you.
Yeah, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the show with us today. We'll be back next week, same time, Thursday, 2 p.m. PST, with a special guest again. Who knows who it'll be? I guess you'll just have to wait and see.
I don't know who it is next week.
Yeah.
It's going to be a surprise to me, too. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if you like it. You're gonna like it, I bet.
I bet I'll like it.
All right, send us home, Tuerck.
All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in this week. Again, we'll be back next Thursday. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like Sam said, slide in my DMs. If you guys got more questions, I'll try to handle some throughout the day today. And we'll see you guys next week. Don't forget to subscribe, watch Driving Line, Middle Tire, Race Service, Rockstar, Gum Out, BC Racing, Mobile One.
Better not forget anyone.
Super Tech, Toyota Racing, Corolla Hatchback.
Keep going. All right.
Rotiform,
Yep. And Drift Idiot.
TRD, and Drifting.
Drift Idiot.
Oh, Drift Idiot.
God.
I forgot. He
Let him
sponsors
call
me.
out your main man.
Drift Idiot sponsors me too
Thank
somehow.
you.
All right, thanks, guys. See you next week.
Peace, guys.